Today was such an informative discussion with Dr. Wolfgang Schöllhorn. He is the original founder, creator of the differential learning training approach. And it is being used across a lot of spectrums. However, he is the person who started it. And this kind of approach has been used by the best coaches in the world, by Pep Guardiola, by Klopp, by Thomas Tuchel, by Arteta, by a lot of clubs he has consulted, Sporting Lisbon, Benfica, Barcelona. He's done a lot in life, and I'm very grateful to him that he took time out to explain how the differential learning, differential training can be applied to football and across a lot of other sports. So go and tune in to this 1 hour podcast, and I'm sure it's going to make you imagine a lot of things that you already do, how you can improvise on it. So go ahead and enjoy. Super excited about today's podcast. It is with a very, very high profile guest, someone who's renowned worldwide in the coaching fraternity. A famous quote: if we want to have extraordinary performance, we need to train extraordinarily. And this is said by today's guest, Professor Dr. Wolfgang Schöllhorn. He's the creator of the differential learning system. For many years, he trained national and international athletes in different sports. In 1990, he received a PhD in biomechanics from the University of Frankfurt. He's also been a professor for training and movement science at the Johannes Gutenberg University in Mainz, and his work in the field of athletics, biomechanics, and motor learning has received several national and international prizes. Delighted to have you. Thank you for joining. How are you?
I'm fine. Thank you for your invitation.
Brilliant. So, before we go into your famous learning system, can we get to know about you as a person, your background, and your journey so far?
Okay. How much time do you have?
You're the boss.
Yeah, well, I would say I'm a curious person, which just was able to keep a child's curiosity. So this was actually my driving force from the beginning. So yes, you said it already. I had this PhD in biomechanics because with this PhD I wanted to combine sports and physics, which I studied. But very soon I realized that biomechanics is not everything. It's giving you a perfect diagnosis, but it's not helping you for changing movement behavior. And this was the reason why I started to study neurophysiology and pedagogy as well. I could have gotten a PhD there too, but this was no more necessary because actually I was studying in the morning and during the day, and in the evening I was coaching my athletes. And this was a big advantage because there I already could apply all my theoretical knowledge immediately to my athletes. And yes, after a very short time, I got 3 junior German champions in track and field. One was in 100-meter sprint, the other was in 110-meter hurdle, 100 hurdle, and the other was in decathlon. And one characteristics of this was that they never did strength training, weightlifting training, which is very unusual in sprint. And in parallel, we had to consult for more than 10 years a lot of national teams, mainly the German national teams, in all throwing events, in decathlon, in heptathlon. Sometimes also basketball came, handball players came, and very soon the football teams came from Barcelona because we had a cooperation with Barcelona University. And at the university, there was Paco Seulo teaching football, and he was very interested in this approach. And I think to a certain part, it became part of the training in Barca. This was already before 2000. And yeah, slowly I started to think about the deeper connections with this. The interesting part for me was that mainly I was a coach for more than 20, 25 years. And I was looking afterwards for a theory which could explain what I was applying to my athletes all the time. So it's the opposite. It's not normally what science is doing. They are developing a certain theory, and then you have to construct the environment in order to get a verification. No, it was first the practical experience, and a lot of friends applied this as well very successfully. And then I started to look for the theory. Interestingly, in parallel, already other groups copied this with another name. And they added something, but the Chinese would say only good things are copied.
Yes.
Meanwhile, I think it's quite often discussed. It's a little bit more discussed with with other names, but nonetheless, it's spreading, and I think it's spreading because it's a theory which is based on physics, which is based on neurophysiology, and a lot of pedagogy is coming into the theory, where I would say there's a big difference in the historical development of these theories, because Central Europe, Germany, France, Switzerland, Austria, they have an enormous, I would say, basis in pedagogy, whereas other countries, mainly, it's UK nations, they don't have this, and they are now discovering this as new. And for us, it's mainly a copy what they are doing, because we need to learn English, but not all the English people learn any other languages, and this is why a lot of English people are, I would say, just ignorant about other developments, but they are, I would say, really 200 years ahead of the other things. So there's a lot of, I would say, making public Central European pedagogy combined with this differential learning, which you mentioned already. And this was one major part there as well for the development of the theory, that actually I wanted to develop something new. And in order to develop something new, you need to know what is the common training method. And before I really started to apply this to my athletes, this would be interesting as well, I would say. I started as a gymnast. I became too tall. Then I played Olympic handball, was member of a state team. I injured my knees during this training. Then I switched to decathlon. I also became member of a state team, and then I became a bobsledder, where I became vice European champion and German champion. And nonetheless, although I had these experiences also with my athletes, I first tried this differential learning method by myself. And this I tried with a new movement, and this movement was karate. So I asked a national coach in karate whether he could teach me this karate, but I had one condition. I only wanted to have him once a week, and the rest I want to do by myself. And this is why I was used by learning an instrument. I learned for more than 10 years oboe. And when you learn an instrument, you normally see your teacher only once a week, and the rest you have to do by yourself. So I did this in karate, and yes, within 2 years, I almost got the black belt. It was the last brown belt. But then I knew, okay, it's working. And from this moment on, I applied this. And by the way, same experience had the German national coach in discus throwing in the beginning of 2000. He said in the beginning, the theory sounds very nice, but now I want to know how the practice looks like. We did 20 minutes exercise with him, and then he said, okay, I'm convinced from now on the national team will train in a differential way. And this was quite impressive for me, because he was world record holder, and he still is. And I didn't know what I could teach him after 40 years of discus experience. But yes, it worked. And I would say all the predictions which I made 1999, meanwhile, are verified. We just recently showed a new verification that the resonance works. So yes, I'm confident that this will continue.
There's so much tried and tested stuff over here. You know, you have experimented so much, and it's amazing to know that you have tried it across so many sports and it has been successful. So that brings me to my next question. What exactly is the differential learning approach?
Well, it's, I would say, a summing up of the knowledge of all the successful coaches, which I knew already. So I would say actually it's nothing new. A lot of coaches have applied this, but they used, I would say, a different terminology of this.
Yeah.
And they only applied it to single athletes in a lot of different ways. And because of my physics background, I was able to summarize this. So the major idea is that we are actually only learning from differences.
Right.
Okay, some other call this meanwhile trial to trial variation,
Yeah.
but the story behind this is quite old. I only know the Greek version, the Greek and the Chinese version. The Greek said you never step into the same river twice, and the Chinese said the only constant is variety.
Yeah.
So although we knew this for more than 2,000 years, there was no consequence on our training process. Okay, I already can hear the excuse, yeah, when we never repeat, what do we have to change? Because also when we are repeating, we are not repeating identically. Yes, this is part of the theory later, but learning from differences means that when you do a movement, pitching in cricket, when you throw the ball, very often a coach is telling you what is wrong. So actually the coach sees a difference. And instead of telling you, you should not do this, we amplify this problem.
Yeah.
And by amplifying this problem, we increase, we call this the fluctuations.
Yeah.
And by increasing this, we cause a bigger difference between two subsequent movements.
Okay.
Which means, okay, you the first time you have to emphasize the shoulder, and the second move you have to emphasize the right knee, and the next you have to emphasize the finger, etc.
Yeah.
So the system has a possibility to compare two subsequent movements, and by comparing two subsequent movements, the system can get additional information.
Yeah.
Okay, and this is normally what we experience every morning when we dress up. So in the beginning, we feel the clothes, but then it's all the time repetition, and we lose this feeling for our clothes. As soon as I remind you to this, then you start again to feel it, but you only feel it when you change something.
Right.
So when I press you the first time on your cheek, okay, you feel it. The second time, the reaction is much lower. The third time, even lower. And then there's almost no more adaptation to this. So we knew for long that our neurons actually are developed for, I would say differences.
Right.
So instead of waiting until these differences will occur by coincidence, we said, no, from the beginning, we have to increase these differences. And all the studies show this meanwhile that this leads to much higher acquisition rates and even higher learning rates afterwards. And then you see a lot of parallels that actually this is how little children are learning.
Yeah.
And one major thing which we know from neurophysiology as well is that we are always taking a lot of information from the difference. For example, when we watch an object with the right eye and with the left eye, then we see this flipping left and right.
Yeah.
And the difference of these two pictures is used by our brain to calculate the distance. And the same we have with the ear. When the sound is coming from the right ear, shortly after this, it's heading the left ear. And this time difference is used by our brain to give the orientation where the sound is coming from.
Right.
So there's a lot of, I would say, neurophysiological evidence for this, but yeah, unfortunately, or for me, fortunately, no one took advantage of this. And this is what we actually introduced. And this is, I would say, only the top of this variation, because actually we knew forever that learning needs variation.
Right.
The problem is that most applied this variation only step by step and do many repetitions. And this is what we meanwhile found, that when you switch all the time, then we have an additional effect on our brain. And this is the reason why, meanwhile, we are looking to apply this in diseases, focal dystonia, or in Parkinsonians, or multiple sclerosis. And we have already first evidence that there are quite successful effects. And this is, yeah, again, because it's based on physics and neurophysiology and not by some master theories.
Yeah, and from a coaching perspective, what do you think are the problems with the current traditional training approaches?
Well, I would say the major problem is that they are not very effective. Okay, you can learn with this, but actually it's hoping that it will work. And my classical example for this is normally, okay, when you teach a class, and this is why it's very interesting for classes as well in school, that when you teach a class mainly with 2 or 3 exercises, then normally only 2 or 3, maybe 5 students become better, but the rest doesn't respond on this.
Yeah.
And side effect of this is that the whole class becomes very similar.
Yeah.
And this is actually where this method is coming from, that the repetition for the whole class is actually coming from military. Because in military, you had to march in the same step lengths, and everyone knows, okay, the front row, the tallest one, they have very small steps, and the last row, the smallest one, they march in huge steps. So this method works only for the mid row.
Yeah.
And we simply have transferred this to school. So only 3 or 4 people will respond on this, and the rest will be the same, but they will not develop their individual strength in this. And this is what we see, meanwhile, when we apply this to groups, that in groups, we get a much bigger variety in solutions, but all of them increase the performance. And this is, I would say, mainly what we are looking for in sports. We want to improve the performance in general, and not only for individual athletes. And this is what we knew in Germany, that in the former East German area, they applied exactly this military style, and they had always in every discipline, they had only 1, 2, or 3 top athletes, and then they had a huge gap. We knew, for example, in West Germany, to be able to participate in the German championships, you needed to have 7,000 points in order to be within the 50 best. In East Germany, you couldn't have had 50 athletes of this performance. I think with the fourth and best of East Germany had already 7,000 points.
Yeah.
So you see already a lot of examples, why and where it had worked and where not.
It's quite an eye opener, because it is true that in a coaching setting, coaching setup, you have only a few athletes who actually shine. So this is interesting. Now, because we have majorly a footballing audience, how do you apply the differential learning approach into practice specifically in football?
Well, this is the questions which I was asked in 2000 and 2003, and was invited to Portugal. And one of these persons copied this with another name. Mainly, I would say the simplest way would be, you have to look to the videos of Pedro Mendonça. He is spreading all these exercises, and mainly it's based on exercises which are applied by Tuchel, by Guardiola, because we consulted them. I would say in the most simple way, you have different areas where you can start with. So you can start in the technical area, you can start in the tactical area, and you also can apply this in the metabolism area. In the technical area, this is where we started in a systematic way. For example, that you do the goal shooting movement with the left arm on top, then the right arm on top. The next is circling with the head. The next is placing the standing leg far away from the ball, far in front, far before the ball. You can hit the ball with the inside, with the front inside, with only with the front, with the outside, also with the heel. These are just a couple of examples of this. Then you can vary the approach. You can jump on the left leg, you can jump on the right leg, and then you can combine all these things. The same we did in ball reception. So you can stop the ball not only with the foot, you can stop the ball with the knee, you can stop the ball with the back, you can stop the ball with the calf. So you can turn all the time. You can stop the ball 90 degrees, turn to the right, 90 degrees to the left. You can stop it with the outside, with the inside. Okay, then you can apply this within the game. So we play, the modern term is small-sided games. You do the small-sided games and everyone has to lift up the left arm. Okay, meanwhile, they realized, okay, it's quite important to keep the arms away because otherwise you get a penalty when it's set. But when we introduced this was not of interest because they had another rule. Nonetheless, when you move, for example, both arms on top, you get a completely different activation of the trunk muscles. This is biomechanics. You have completely different levers. So when you vary all the time, and you can align this by ball possession.
Yeah.
So when the ball possession is changing, you have to change the body position.
Yeah.
And always the possessing team has to announce the type of movement they have to do. Okay, and then you can increase the difficulty as well. That okay, you divide the field into different zones. So in zone 1, you're allowed to have 3 contacts. In the middle zone, you have 2, and the last zone only 1. And when the ball possession is changing, then the tasks in the zones are switching as well.
Yes.
So you and then you can divide this into squares and whatever. So actually, it's mainly always to, yeah, I think the English term for this is to challenge the athlete.
Yeah.
As soon as the athlete is able to cope with this exercise, you have to switch, because every repetition is normally boring for our neural system.
Right.
And this is what you very often hear from little children. When you repeat the things, the children ask, okay, what can we do?
Yes.
Do you have any suggestion? So, and this is why I would say the width of this effects is much broader than sports. This is what we meanwhile apply in school as well, that by learning languages, it's actually the same.
Yes.
So very often I am asked, okay, how do you learn languages? And yeah, okay, you need to know the word, but what is the perfect English? Is it Oxford English? Is it Indian English? Is it American English? Even in United States, Boston English and Texas English is completely different. But the interesting part, and this has been studied already in parallel without our knowledge, and not dependent on differential learning, that when you vary these languages, when you try to simulate them, then you learn the language much better. And another thing is when what we feel immediately, when you have different types of movements, it's causing different emotions. And when you learn a language in a different emotional context, you have exactly the same effect. So actually, I would say we are trying to activate the brain in very different areas. And this is what we are testing in the meantime as well, that what type of influence is given by the emotions, training with different emotions, being aggressive, being cool, being lazy, or what happens with different music.
Yes.
And this is why we always do in parallel. And actually, this is where I was coming from in the beginning. We we study methods how to diagnose these changes. And meanwhile, we are using these machine learning approaches, deep learning algorithm. My coworker, Dr. Horst, is quite leading in this area, that we are looking for methods how we can change a gait pattern.
Right.
And first, okay, it's very easy to identify a person by one ground contact. But within this one ground contact, we are able to identify also the type of emotions. We are able to identify the type of fatigue, the grade of fatigue, and we also can see what type of music they are listening to. So when we see all these effects on a movement which has been repeated millions of times, we can imagine what the effect is actually in football games. When the audience is crying to you, okay, the day before on Friday I had something different to eat. And by the way, this is what we started 6 years ago. We went to India, to Uchire, where our students are learning the Indian philosophy, Ayurveda and yoga, because we know that with these methods, we can simulate, I would say, similar brain states, which we achieve in differential learning. And these brain states are much more effective for learning than what we know from in Western Hemisphere.
So this last part that you mentioned about yoga, so would you say that football coaches, football clubs, they should implement a yoga program within their football curriculum?
Well, in general, I wouldn't recommend for everyone the same.
Yeah.
So I would say it's just a method, because our students also go to China and learn TCM and Qigong. And what we learned in India as well is there are many methods of yoga.
Yes.
So only the classical, I would say in Western Hemisphere mainly, they only know the asanas,
Yes.
the different positions. But this is only the beginning of this. And this is what actually Tuchel took over. And when he left Chelsea, he went to India for 2 months yoga retreat. So slowly this is coming. And this is what what I'm looking for is, what are the commonalities between differential learning, yoga, and TCM, traditional Chinese medicine, or Qigong. And actually, all of these are leading to a very similar brain state.
Right.
Now, I would say it's a different culture. And what we meanwhile would say, okay, differential learning is the beginning. But then you can continue with the more advanced methods in yoga and Qigong. But there are a lot of different varieties to help the people. And colleagues of mine have shown that all these approaches cause anatomical changes in the brain.
Right.
And yes, it's not only for footballer, it's also for children in school. But it's always about to a certain content. Don't do it in a too ambitious way. What we saw a lot in India as well, that they are very flexible and they really go for competition with these asanas. And actually, this is not, I would say, what I'm looking for. It's mainly for health. It's helping the athletes to cope with the body and with the exercise. And we did some studies on this. So when you do differential learning in front of mathematics lessons, they learn mathematics better.
Yeah.
And the same happens when you do it afterwards.
Right.
So for me, it's meanwhile, it could replace warming up. It also could replace a cooling down phase.
Okay.
So for me, it's mainly looking for methods which are helping us to maintain or to improve our performance. And we shouldn't, I would say, go only to the country borders.
And do you reckon that differential learning approach can be applied in goalkeeping and fitness training in football, because a lot of those activities are done in isolation?
Yes, I would say a lot of European coaches are applying this meanwhile, but goalkeeping training, I would say, is already very versatile. But nonetheless, as soon as or as long as the coach is watching you from outside and is telling you what you're doing wrong,
Yeah.
you have possibilities to change.
Right.
So when you, instead of telling them what is wrong, you see it's a kind of fluctuation. It's a deviation of what they have in mind. And the deviations, they always have the chance to learn. So actually, we call this in physics term, it's an instability. And an instability has the characteristics that you only need a small amount of energy to change the state. So instead of making this mistake smaller, and this goes for more than 20 years, or normally it's not successful because the athlete doesn't feel, we tell the athletes, okay, increase this. So for example, in football, when we go to tactics, when they play this 4-4-2 system, normally they are equally distributed in the four lane. Now we say, okay, try to move both to a side and try to solve the problem from this initial condition, or move all to one side, because very often, or sometimes by coincidence, this can happen in competition as well.
Right.
Very often you see this in, yeah, I would say in this fast break offense things, that the defense doesn't know how to respond because they were never training this. And
Correct.
this is where actually it was coming from. Okay, it's normal in track and field, but in tactics, it's the same.
Yeah.
So make the situation as difficult as possible in order to challenge the athletes. And then during competition, it's no more problem. So the competition becomes actually almost relaxation.
I get that. Yes. Yeah, I get that. Makes complete sense. And also, are you aware of any reputed coaches within football who use your approach?
Yeah, I know some official ones. It's Tuchel. We consulted him 2009. He's now a coach in Bavaria Munich.
Yeah.
But I think it's only part of his huge knowledge. Also, Jürgen Klopp in Liverpool is applying this, and especially his physiotherapists are applying this. Some of his, then Guardiola, he is applying parts of this, but he learned it by his coach from Paco Seulo from Spain. He was a coach of Paco Seulo. Then I talked to Arteta
Yeah.
from Arsenal. The same in Portugal. I consulted Benfica. I consulted Sporting, also Porto. I consulted Barcelona. Paris was there also. Meanwhile, Nagelsmann, the German national coach, applies this as well.
Yeah.
But for me, even more interesting is that a lot of coaches have applied this for long, but they didn't talk about this
Okay.
because they say it's my secret. And when I tell you about my secret, you can beat me. So a lot of coaches are keeping this for their secret. And only when they are, I would say, successful enough, then they can stay with this.
The names you have taken of the coaches, I mean, they are huge. So I'm sure there's definitely something great happening with your approach if coaches of that magnitude are following it. And
Yeah,
also,
but I think these coaches use this because they are extraordinary. So what I realized in the meantime is, okay, they tried this in the first without knowing that there is something behind this.
yes.
But they went for this risk. And this is what I normally said as a coach and athlete as well. No risk, no fun.
Yes.
Okay, you have to risk something
Yeah.
to go for this. And actually, yeah, to be honest, I applied this already 1992, 1993 in Eintracht Frankfurt, only in the area of sprinting, running. And this is what I said already in 1992, that the future of football will become much faster. You need to have sprinters, and this is okay. The top team started with sprinters in the offense, and then the next team followed with sprinters in the defense. And you saw as well that meanwhile, I would say the average contact time in football decreased from 1.8 seconds to 0.7 seconds. So the game became much faster. It became a single contact game very often. And just by thinking of pursuing this approach by repetition, it will be, I would say, an infinite process. So I would say when you, some people state that you need 5,000 repetitions for a single technique. When you calculate all the different techniques, I would say you are 80 years old when you have automized all these exercises. But with 80 years, you don't have the muscles for fast movements anymore. So it doesn't make sense to do these repetitions. There's one exception. The exception is when you have a person who has an, I would say, enormous need for safety, for control. Then they need some repetitions. And this is what we very often say. Again, my beloved example with children. What are we doing with children when we bring them to bed? Very often we read books to them. And very often they are asking for a book which they know. Because knowing about what will come is giving you a feeling of safety. And this is necessary in order to fall asleep. Okay, now it's the same in athletes. Now, when someone is psychologically very stable, then we can vary in the motor area quite a lot. But when they are psychologically unstable, then we need to come up with repetition to give them the safety, but only for a certain time until the safety is there, and then we can continue.
Right. This is, I mean, this is such a deep topic, you know, like these are things that happen on a daily basis, but we don't really look at it that way, for sure. And I'm grateful that you've shed light on all this. But also, can you shed some more light on something called stochastic resonance, which is a big thing in your approach?
Actually, this is a term coming from physics, and mainly it's reflecting, I would say, the problem of publications. Because in the beginning, we tried to publish our approach with the term noise or fluctuations. And in physics, noise is a very abstract term, which mainly can be described as deviation from a given value. Now, when we submitted our first publications, then we had mainly psychologists as reviewers, and they said this cannot be noise because noise is, in their opinion, very limited in a frequency domain with white noise. Now, when you come from physics, you know that frequency can only be determined when you have equal distant sample rate. Now, in training, we don't have this. Sometimes we have 5 minutes break, 2 minutes break, 1 minute break. So we used the term entropy. And instead of using the term noise, we satisfy the reviewer and said stochastic resonance. So the first is stochastic or stochastic perturbation. Stochastic means, this is also coming from physics, it's almost arbitrary. Almost, I say, because most of us say or understand arbitrary. When I ask you to tell me the first 10 numbers in an arbitrary sequence, you would start with 5, 7, 3, 6, and so on. So a very, I would say, wild structure. But from a stochastic point of view, you also could say 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10. This is also stochastic. So in order to provide, I would say, my colleagues, the bridge, how to analyze these movements, we use this term stochastic. Okay, and then later we realized, okay, that in the beginning, a lot of colleagues interpreted this, okay, now you can do everything. Unfortunately, one podcast from the United States is telling the same, and it's an intentionally misunderstanding, a misinterpretation. No, you cannot do everything, because we knew already from the beginning, every coach knows this, okay, when you have, for example, very fast movements, fencing or volleyball, they should not do swimming, bicycle riding, or running, because this is actually slowing down your movements. This has much longer ground contacts. It's activating completely different muscle structure. So, and I know a lot of professional athletes, they have a contract that they are not allowed to do these sports.
Okay.
Okay, so we knew, okay, when a shot putter is doing bicycle riding or swimming or cross-country skiing, then it's decreasing the performance, which means that it has to be an optimum. And the optimum curve always in physics means that it's a resonance of two signals.
Yeah.
Resonance of two signals in this case means the coach is coming up with a stochastic sequence of exercises and the athlete is responding with a certain amount of fluctuations.
Right.
Which can be described with with noise as well.
Yeah.
Now, in the beginning, 20 years ago, it was quite risky, but okay, meanwhile, even in physics, everyone is using this, that the stochastic noise of the athlete has to be adjusted to the noise of the coach.
Mm-hmm.
So this is the reason why I said from the beginning that actually the coach has to take care of having enough noise in the system.
Yeah.
So when you have an athlete who is jumping all over, you have to reduce the noise.
Right.
So when someone is staying only with repetitions, then you have to increase the noise. So from the beginning, it was an adjustment of two signals. And actually, this is what I'm always teaching in my courses, that the first task of a coach is to read the athlete. So what is the athlete doing? And by reading the athlete, it helps a lot. And this is developed by a friend of mine, Bertrand Terola, in Trifibulate. It's called action type system or movement preferences, where you can see in terms of their movements how they will respond or how you have to talk to them. So some people, they are more horizontal. They say, okay, give me the information, I will find my own structure. Others, which are more vertical, they need a clear structure from the beginning. Mm-hmm. Some people need to be motivated by competition. Some are only be motivated by relationship. Right. So we do it for the group, and the others do, and you cannot change them. Right. And this already gives you, I would say, just a first hint how versatile actually or differential the language should be as well. You need to talk in different languages and with different exercises to an athlete because it's very individual. And this is what we found in more recent thing as well. I mentioned this already. It's not only individual, it's also situative. And this is coming again back to your old culture in yoga. It's a difference whether you do the treatment in the morning or you do the treatment in the afternoon or in the evening. So actually, it's mainly only building a bridge to very old knowledge, which have been, I would say, covered from a lot of military guys, which were very ambitious following a certain success. No, in differential learning, you need to read the athlete. The athlete is talking to me. And dependent on the response of the athlete, I have to adjust my exercises for an optimum outcome.
From this entire thing, what was most bewildering was that for an athlete playing a certain sport, it could be detrimental playing other sports, and you said it's in their contract. So, are you aware? Is there anything in football, like for footballers? Are there any particular sports that they should avoid that could, maybe have a detrimental effect on their performance?
No, it's always about the doses. I would say they could do every sports, but you shouldn't do all sports for a long time. Yeah. So I would say swimming is good in the off season, or we call this bathing because swimming is swimming laps and real conditioning training. But when you just go to the water and swim a little bit around for relaxation, there's no problem with this. A similar thing is normally with cross-country skiing. I would say cross-country skiing you shouldn't do for too long. Okay. Because it's yeah, it's known in muscle physiology. When you do endurance sports, it's actually destroying your fast retrieval muscles,
Right.
and you need them. And this is again what you see in the meantime in football, that because it's getting faster, you have more sprinters in there which have to be replaced after 70, 80 minutes because the fast retrieval muscles are not that enduring.
Yeah.
And I'm really waiting for the moment when football is changing to the exchange system like in handball, where you can exchange all the time in
Yes.
order to increase the speed even more, or like in ice hockey.
Right.
At the moment, you have, I think, 5 players which you can replace. And I'm really waiting for the moment when they increase the speed even more by replacing all the time without any limitations.
It'll become such a more entertaining sport that way. But also, you've mentioned a couple of sports. Now, what's your opinion of gym for footballers then? Because gym can also be kind of considered a sporting activity.
What do you mean with gym? You
So if
mean
so,
you
basically,
mean weightlifting
yes,
or
weightlifting, weightlifting.
it's a way how you can increase the variety of exercises, but you need to know exactly what you do.
Right.
Um, I know a friend of mine, he came from East Germany, Martin Sust. Now he is retired from Graz University, but dependent on the Hill equation, it's very sensitive which method you in strength training you apply to the athlete. So depending on the initial level, you need to apply completely different exercise series to the athlete to improve them. So I would say there's a lot of potential to be developed there as well.
Right.
But my point in differential training was actually a more private thing.
Yeah.
Okay, in parallel, when I studied sports and physics, my mind was, okay, maybe I will become a teacher in developmental countries, for example, in Africa or South Asia or wherever. And they don't have any money. So you should not put too much effort in equipment.
Mm.
And then I thought, okay, look to nature. Now, when you look to nature, a cheetah, the fastest animal, which we know, is never doing squats or bench press or whatever.
Yes.
Okay, actually, I would say nature has given us everything to get all these forces. So when you, and this is, I would say, one advantage of my biomechanical background, when you look to muscle physiology in combination with the levers, so you can lift up the right arm with the flexed elbow, then you have a very short lever.
Yeah.
But when I do the same with an extended arm, the lever is much higher and the force of the deltoideus muscle has
Yes.
to increase. Now you can do this. This is F equals M times A. This is mainly the M which is changing. Now when you change the A, you can do it in a slow way. You can do it in a fast way.
Yeah.
Then you produce also different forces. And now when you combine a longer lever with a higher acceleration, you can produce all the forces which you need. And this is what we did in sprint running. For example, normal sprint running is with bent elbow.
Yeah.
Okay, what's going to happen when you let them sprint with extended arms, with extended elbow? And then when you not only let them run in this way, but let them run with abducted elbows, and then let them run with abducted elbows and extended elbows.
Yeah.
Then you have an enormous force on the trunk muscles. You have to compensate this with the leg muscles, and then you get all the stimuli which you need actually for this adaptation. When you do this in different surrounding, hill up, hill down, in curves, left and right, and actually there's nothing else. And when you observe a cheetah, they are doing the same.
Right.
Okay, they are fast, but they when they are in direct competition with a lion, they have no chance. But lion is not that fast. So in order to build up muscles, you get stronger, but this has been done very often in sprint. They have to build up muscles to become a sprinter. But meanwhile, do you see that they are getting more thin?
Yeah.
Because they realized, okay, when I build up muscle, I have to carry this weight.
Yes.
And this is also, for me, a misunderstanding in the history, because originally the sprinters, they were quite thin.
Right.
Okay, then the American sprinters realized in sprinting, I cannot make any money, but I can do it in football. Now, in football, I need the weight, so they started to increase the weight. And the others just observed they became stronger and stronger, so we have to copy this.
Right.
So I would say you need to understand why someone is doing a certain thing. And with respect to health, it's also an advantage when you apply all the forces always to the whole system, jumping in different direction, jumping in different lengths. You always have, you always put load on all the systems, on the bones, on cartilage, on tendons, on tissues, on ligaments, on muscles. And this is one reason why a lot of injuries happen, because in these biomechanical categories, we have different types of adaptation. Now, when you look to muscles, muscles adapt within 4 to 6 weeks. The ligaments and tendons, ligaments and soft tissues, they adapt within 6 months. But the cartilage and bone, they need about 1 year to adapt. So when you build up a muscle for 2 or 3 months, the bone is already lacking for about 2 years. And when you have this discrepancy, you get the injuries.
Okay.
And this is why I love to have all things in most cases together, which doesn't mean only playing, because only playing is boring for long term as well. No, for me, okay, you can play, but you can do sprint training, you can do weightlifting for distraction, for mental distraction as well, and to put different load. And one advantage is as well, when you do weightlifting training, then you get a certain muscle soreness, which I don't think is necessary. But with this muscle soreness, the next day, you train the technique in a different way. The same with the tactics. You are much slower. We know when you are in a very high level of muscle soreness, we have changes in muscle forces for 2 weeks. So this is what I always have in my mind by applying these differences.
Right.
It's also about health. And a friend of mine, Herbert Wagner from Salzburg, he did a study in volleyball players where they applied differential training and they had much less injuries over the season.
Right.
So actually, it's a very good prevention as well.
This is you've basically been able to back up your theory with facts, and that's why the credibility is so much more. Now I understand that some of the best coaches in the world are following your theory. You have Guardiola, Klopp, Tuchel, Arteta. But do you feel the need to try and make even more coaches from around the world aware? So, are you doing anything to promote differential learning amongst national football federations or clubs?
Yes, but I'm not trying to convince anyone.
Yeah.
I can offer this. If they take this, okay, it's fine. I will support them. I will help them because actually we are advancing this theory more and more. But I'm offering this more in terms of courses, one thing, but this was one reason why we started our master program in movement well-being 5 years ago. Just in February, we will go to India again for 2 months. The same to China, to Shanghai. And in April, next year, 1st of April, we will start with our new master program, which is mainly online. And the new master program will be about innovative coaching in high performance sports, where we really include all these knowledge from different areas. We also include how to deal with digital media, how to found a company in the management area, in the health area. We are trying to include this all there. And while we were founding this master program, we saw that there are a lot of master programs all over the world, but they are mainly about performance diagnosis. So they can perfectly diagnose, and I would say our thing is supplementary. When you have the diagnosis, what do I have to do in order to bring them to another state?
Yeah.
And yes, very often I'm invited by clubs to educate their coaches And yes, it's spreading more and more step by step.
I was going to come to part of what you mentioned. So, a 1 hour podcast is never going to be enough for you to ever do justice to such a wide, big, and effective topic. So, for coaches, for athletes, for anyone related to sports, if they wish to, get deeper knowledge through your teaching in this field, what can you like tell us where exactly they can access any kind of course, any kind of program, any kind of online, offline learning?
Well, I'm a professor in Germany. I'm paid by taxes, which means that all things which I produce are available on ResearchGate. So these are the publications. They are all open PDF. When you want to have an immediate access, then you should just look for differential learning. In football, you will find a lot of links there from different areas. We are offering time by time courses where you can apply, but I think the best way is that these associations are organizing lectures series where I can come or with a friend of mine for 2 or 3 days, not in order to have this only theoretically, but to see it in a practical session. And this is what I did in Sporting Lisbon, in Benfica Lisbon, and in Barca, that I go there, we mix up theory and practice. We have this discussion for 1 day, 1 or 2 days. Then we have a break. And after 2 or 3 months, I come again. And then we solve the questions and problems which occur there as well. And this has a very big advantage that I always get feedback and can develop my theory even further.
And part of when I did some research on this, so I found something on a website called Hub Soccer, where
Yes.
yes, where you're basically there's you on video explaining a lot of things. So is that a good entry level option for coaches who just want to get a basic idea?
Yes, I would say for a basic idea, yes, but you're now reminding me that I told them to offer a new lecture on the tactical training. And maybe I should use the time for during the holidays to do this finally. But no, I would say it's a good introduction, a good beginning in the theoretical area. But again, the page from Pedro Mendonça, he is offering a lot of videos on exercises which they apply meanwhile in differential learning.
Awesome. This brings us to the end of an amazing chat. And I'm ever so grateful to you because you've given just nearly an hour of your time on short notice, despite the channel not being really, really huge. And that shows your humility. And yes, it's been a wonderful chat. It's going to be very useful to all the serious coaches who will be listening to the entire podcast because there's so many ideas. At least when I heard as I was listening to you, there are so many ideas I have of how my next session is going to be. So yes, thank you so much for your time. And I
Thank you very much. It was my pleasure. And I wish you good luck with your channel.